Hello guys and welcome for another Eternal video. In today's one we will speak about perks and charms which are applicable to our jewelry pieces, as the last time we were discussing all of those but for the armor pieces. If you still don't know what is the difference between a fixed perk, regular perk and a charm, I highly suggest you to check the previous video, as you will find quite a lot of useful information there, and of course you would also see which are the most desirable perks for your armor slots. For today, before going into further details, I must say that we have quite a lot of new perks and they are mostly on the ring, which would basically mean that we will have a lot of offensive perks, as the ring is usually the place where we get all those offensive types of bonuses. The first perk that we're gonna take a look at is the Enchanted Resilience. This is an Amulet perk, as we can see here, and this one will only work in PvP, as it will reduce the attacker's basic attack damage by 10%, but it will increase attacker's ability damage by 5% when you are below 50% HP. Something extremely important to note here is that the 10% reduction of basic attack damage will be applicable always, while the 5% increased ability damage taken will be only when you drop under 50% health. And this is set due to that small comma here that many people pass and they don't see. So have this in mind, this perk is amazing and a lot of people don't really consider it due to the fact that the text is a little bit misleading. The next perk is the Skilled Resilient, which basically is the same thing with the opposite effect. It will reduce the ability damage of the attacker by 5%, but it will increase the attacker's basic attacks when you are under 50% HP. If we go over to the rings, the first perk that we have new for this season is the Purifying Command, which is a healer perk. When you remove a debuff from an ally, it will heal the ally for 20% weapon damage. I'm not entirely sure if this is an extremely good or maybe not so good perk, because I'm not a healer, but as you can imagine it will give another option for the healers to boost their healing potentials. And then we start with all of the perks that are extremely nice when it comes to offense for our ring slots. The first one is Unscattered Empowerment. As we can see, melee light attacks will grant 1 stack and melee heavy attacks will grant you 2 stacks of 5% empower for 8 seconds, and for every hit dealt without taking damage, maximum of 6 stacks. So in theory you can reach 30% empower if you don't get hit by anything, and this would be an amazing thing to get if you are a melee. Now of course here, if we are speaking about PvP, it's a bit of a different story, but for PvE this is an amazing perk and it will be probably useful for any build out there. Taking a hit will remove the empower and increase the instance of damage by 15%. Of course, it's the negative side, it's the trade-off. But I personally think that this perk for PvE is quite a useful one, especially when it comes down to high damage builds and people who know when to dodge the attacks of the mobs. The next one we have Rogue Alacrity, and this one will give backstabbing a target with an active haste, will remove one of their hastes and grant you 12% haste for 4 seconds. This haste will be dispelled if you receive a critical hit. Now to imagine the situation, imagine that you are playing a hatchet, you are chasing a healer. The healer has a haste, you hit him with a backstab, you get one of his hastes and he's of course getting slowed because he's losing his haste and you are getting 12% extra. I think it's a nice perk, maybe not the best one out there, but definitely a usable one. And then if you get hit by a critical hit, it will be dispelled. This is quite a questionable one because not always there will be critical hits coming towards you, but you never know what the situation will be. I would say that this perk can be usable for assassin builds, but maybe outside of that not much can be done with it, so maybe I would pass. Then the next one we have Mortal Strike. It's another really interesting perk, one of the new ones. Killing a target will cause your next ability hit within 20 seconds to deal 22% more damage. Now the numbers are quite high, but we have to always mention one thing, and this thing is that kills in New World are not happening so often as we think. And of course, this is a kill, which means that you have to be the one scoring the kill. If you take 99% of the HP of the enemy and someone else finishes the kill, you are not going to get this perk. So I'm not entirely sure if it's worth it. Plus, it's only on your next ability. It's not for a duration of 22 seconds that you deal that much damage. So I would say that this is most likely a bit on the weak side. The next one is called Purging Infliction. Hitting a target inflicted by one of your damage over time effects will reduce the duration of damage over time effects on yourself by 5%. In other words, 2 fire staffs are fighting each other, you hit him, he hits you, when you hit him, you reduce the duration of the dots for 5%. In my opinion, this is a complete joke because basically the duration is not a problem. All of the dots are quite quickly, removed, and just reducing it by 5% is something negligible. To say it in other words, the dots from the fire staff are lasting for 5 to 6 seconds. If the enemy has a desert sunrise, it's even less. So those 5% are just negligible. I would say that this is a really bad perk. Then we go to the next one, which is quite the opposite, and I think it's one of the best perks especially for fire mages. Gain 7% increased critical chance against targets with your damage over time effects. Now this, as we said, damage over time effects or dots are quite a lot, but they are with short duration of time. Some of them of course can be prolonged, but in general the durations are not that long. So if you are playing a bow, if you are playing a fire staff, if you are playing a musket, if you dot someone for fire, nature, burn, whatever is your dot, you would get the additional 7% critical chance damage to that same target. And I think that this is super nice when it comes to damage dealing builds, so maybe have that in mind. Then we go for the next one, which is enchanted attacks. Light and heavy attacks will deal 3% increased base damage. Now here's something really important that has to be mentioned, that this is the base damage of your attacks. The base damage, guys, I will repeat it again, is the most important damage because it cannot be gathered so easily as the empowers. Empowers are having a cap of 50% and they can be provided either by yourself or by your teammates. But the base damage is not having a limit and it's really hard to find. So every base damage that you can get in your build is always a welcome and nice thing. I think that this one is really nice for builds that are relying on basic attacks, such as hatchet players, spear players, maybe even great axe players. So I would leave it to you to decide if you need more base damage on your basic attacks or you need more base damage on something else. Then we have enchanted skills, and that's why I said something else, because here quite the opposite. The base damage will be increasing our abilities and not our basic attacks. This of course is suitable mostly for mages. Even though some mages still have relatively high cooldowns, it would be nice to get those 2.5% in some cases. And of course the last one is called Enchanted Totality. If you are not sure if you want more damage on your basic attacks or more damage on your abilities, you can technically have more damage on everything, as Enchanted Totality will increase all the damage by 2%, and of course that would be applicable to both your abilities and basic attacks. I think that this perk is technically one of the best when it comes to rings, because 2% might not be that much, but it's always there and it's just a flat increase of damage, so it's pretty nice. Then we have another interesting choice which can be slotted for quite a lot of builds, and it's a Keen Switch. On a weapon swap, increase your critical chance by 9% for the next 3 seconds or until your next hit. Now this perk, of course, only by its own, it's not that much. 9% of critical chance is definitely not something incredible, but if we are running something that is relying heavily on crit, or we are having a critical chance build, this can be this last perk of the puzzle that can boost our critical even higher, and therefore I believe that it's a nice perk in such cases. Maybe if you play again a fire staff or something that has a high critical chance damage, this can be a really nice thing. And of course the benefit is only when you switch your weapons, so you need a build where you change your weapons quite a lot, because it has only 3 seconds cooldown. So if you are standing only on one weapon, you would not get the bonus from it. Then the next one, almost the last one, we have the Cursed Skill. Increase ability damage dealt by 5%, but decrease the basic attack damage by 10%. Similar to the ones on the Amulet, here we have those on the ring, but of course this is increase of damage, not decrease. So here again, if you prioritize your abilities over your basic attacks, you can go for this one, or you can choose the next one, which is called Cursed Enchantment, which technically gives you the opposite. It increases the basic attack damage, but decreases the ability damage. Now for the first one, I would definitely not increase my abilities on my mage, for example, but I would decrease my basic attacks. But for this one, the Cursed Enchantment, I would definitely take a look on it if I'm playing a spear, if I'm playing a great axe, if I'm playing a hatchet, simply because the cooldowns on some of the weapons, such as the great axe, let's say, with the gravity and all those things, they have really high cooldowns. So having more damage on your basic attacks throughout the whole period of time and just losing 5% of the damage of your crowd control abilities like the gravity well or your escaping abilities such as the charge, I think it's a pretty decent trade-off. Now those are all the new perks when it comes to the Season 10 new additions to rings and amulets. I have a list here with all the perks, of course, for amulets, rings and earrings, and we still have all the perks from the previous seasons, like for example Fortify, Divine, and then we have Empowered, Alacrity, Protections, different types of them, Well-being being before Health but now called Well-being, Stamina Recovery, and so on and so on. When it comes to amulets, we definitely have to have in mind that same way as the armor perks, we will be having some of the fixed perks and we will be having some of the perks that we will change. The same logic for the skills is applied here. I don't prefer and I don't like to have skills, weapon skills, on any different piece than the weapon for Season 10, simply because the skills will be giving more bonuses when they are on the weapon. And I will give the same example like I did the last time. If we are looking at Empowered Spike, for example, which is the ability of the Ice Gauntlet, if it's placed on any other gear than the Ice Gauntlet, it will give us 15% more damage to rooted targets and 10% more damage to slowed ones. However, if we place this perk on the Ice Gauntlet, we would get 24% more damage to rooted targets and then 16% more to slowed ones. This basically works with every single skill perk in the game and every single weapon in the game. So I highly suggest you, the perks that you are going to use for your builds, try to slot them on your weapons. If we take this out of the way, because all of those charms, which are the skilled charms, if we take them out of the way, this will leave us with 5 slots that we have to decide what we want to place in them in order to get the maximum efficiency when it comes to structuring our build. My personal choice for the amulet is to skip the gem slot, because if we have a gem slot, we might be forced to use an onyx or an opal for the maximum benefit. But if we decide to go for protection, which I'm currently trying to find, oh, there they are. If we go for a protection, but those are the old protections because I see 7.5% increase, they should be having 10. I believe that they still didn't upgrade the site. So basically, all the new protections that we have for the amulet would give you a value of 10%. Here it says 7.5, but this is the previous one. So I think that now when we don't have a limit, I think 3 protections probably would be your best choice. If you get lucky, of course, to get good ones, let's say Flame Protection, Slash and Trust, or maybe the 3 physical ones, which are Strike, Slash and Trust if you are a melee, this would be the perfect scenario. And then for the last 2 perks, because those would take 3 slots, I would probably go with Enchanted Resilience, which I believe it's an amazing perk, and I think that it will give you a lot of value. And for last perk, maybe, but just maybe, and of course dependent on the build, you can go for Shirking Empower, which is extremely good perk, especially this season. It got a little bit boost. Technically it gives 10% of Empower, not 6 as it's mentioned here, and it has of course a duration of 7 seconds instead of 10, but it also stacks 3 times, which can give you a bonus of 30% Empower basically for 7 seconds, which is extremely nice. Or if you don't like it, maybe you can go with something defensive. Maybe you can put, for example, Shirking Heals, you can put Shirking Fortification, you can put Enchanted Ward, basically anything that you are, aiming to get in the form of defense or offense. But in general, 3 protections, type of protection can be any, then maybe 1 offensive and 1 more defensive, or if you are really into the DPS, maybe you can go with 2 offensive. Then if I have to look into the ring, I would go, just a second, let me open the ring so we can look at the correct piece. So we are looking at the ring. It's not the correct gear score, but it's technically the same thing. We have 5. Okay, let me actually find the correct one, because this one still says attributes, and I'm pretty sure that some people will get confused about it. They will be like, wait, we don't have attributes anymore, what are you showing us? So there it is. We are now having a ring, 5 perks, and therefore we can start imagining what kind of perks we can have in them. If I will be playing a fire staff, I would probably aim to get the maximum damage possible, but here I would highly suggest you to go with a ring that has a gem socket. Now, why is that an important piece? I said it as well for the armors. If you go for an armor or a jewelry piece without a gem socket, it's fine to have 1 or 2 of those pieces, because you would have a really good offense. but if you are lacking too many gems in your gear, you would not have enough protection and you will be such an easy target to kill. So don't do that. Avoid going glass cannon builds unless you are playing a musket. It's not really worth it to not have gems on most of your gear. So if I don't have a gem already on my amulet, here I would definitely suggest you to go with a gem. And this means that we are left with 4 perks. Now, of course, again, it would highly depend on what do you want to slot. If you play a fire staff, I would suggest you to take critical infliction, because every time you hit someone, he will be burning, and this means that you gain 7% increased critical damage to that person without doing basically nothing. Then I think for all kinds of builds, Enchanted Totality can be an amazing piece simply because it increases the damage. But of course, if you play something that deals more basic attacks than abilities, then maybe Enchanted Skills is even better because it gives an additional 0.5%. If you are playing PvE, as I said earlier, Unscated Empowerment would be even better because you can guarantee your empower extremely easy, but also have in mind that in raids and such cases where you have a group content in PvE, there is too much of an empower, so maybe it's not the best perk as well. So all depends on your choice and approach to the game. Now, if we imagine that we have 2 or 3 offensive perks, maybe you would want to have 1 defensive here, and again, you can slot Shirking Heals, Shirking Fortification, something that suits your needs when it comes to defense. Or if you get extremely lucky with 4 offensive perks, why not just go for it? I guess it would pay off because the ring indeed has one of the best perks when it comes to offense. And then the last thing that we have to discuss is the earring. Let me again try to find the one that doesn't have the attributes so we don't get confusion. The earring, like I said, and if we go down here to the perks, we will see that we have almost the same perks as before, all of those here, plus this Purifying Toast up there, because I think Purifying Toast at this point is a completely gone perk. Nobody plays it anymore. I think unless you have like a random drop that you really wanted to use and for some reason Purifying Toast is there, nobody is playing this perk anymore. Unfortunately, it's too weak for the current meta of the game, but those are the perks on the earring, the original ones. Of course, you can still slot there Skilled Enchantment, Harnessings, and all the different charms basically in the game. But if we exclude the charms and we look at the fixed perks, those are the ones that we can get. The only exception here that is kind of new thing is maybe the Refreshing Move and the Refreshing Recovery, as they were parts of different places. Refreshing Move was a weapon perk, Refreshing Recovery was an amulet perk. Now they are moved to the earring section simply because everything related to refreshing is now on the earrings. This is the reason why. So if we have to be completely honest, I think that for mages and healers, refreshment is a must-have. There is no doubts about it. You need more cooldowns simply because you rely on your abilities. I think that refreshing and refreshing move can proc together, which means that you can have them both at the same time on the same item. But the chances of this happening, of course, are in the hands of RNG Jesus, because you cannot force those perks. They are randomly generated by the game, so you need to get lucky. If we play mage or a healer, those two are a must-have. And if we speak about the previous one, we already have a full set. If we speak about DPSs and if we speak about someone who aims to be more tanky or a frontline, then maybe Refreshing Move can be a case, maybe Nimble can be a case, maybe even Regeneration, even though it got nerfed a little bit, or maybe Fortifying Toast. One other perk that is extremely valuable, and I didn't really hear too many people speaking about it, is Healing Heart. Healing Heart, guys, currently can heal you up to 1000 HP per tick. It depends, of course, on your weapon damage, because it will heal you for 3 ticks. I actually made a testing. It's not 4 ticks, it has a question mark, it's 3 ticks. But Healing Heart can heal you on a Heart Rune usage for 9% of your max HP, sorry, not of your weapon damage. And if you have a good max HP, you can get almost 1000 back, and it's really, really nice. It's really good, it's really powerful, and it can help you a lot, especially if you are frontlining. And then, of course, one other perk that most of the PvE players already know is the Beloved one, and it's not only because you gain less threat, meaning that the boss would not turn on you, but also because you get 10% more damage to taunted enemies, which means that every time the tank is activating his taunt, you are having an increased damage by 10% for between 6 to 8 seconds. So in general, to conclude it all again with a small TLDR, avoid having skill perks on your jewelries the same way like I've asked you to avoid them on your armor pieces. aim mostly for the perks that are beneficial to your specific build, and look at those look at the perks that are fixed into the specific jewelries, like the ring one for example, in order to get the best value. Don't follow metas, because there is no meta currently, and I think that there will be no meta probably in the next 2 months, simply because there is way too many combinations and there is way too many things that can be tested. Quite a lot of perks and quite a lot of builds are useful, so imagine a build, go for it, try to get the best perks for it and test it out. Thank you guys for watching. The next video will be about the perks for the weapons, and there is quite a lot of things that I want to share there with you, because there is indeed a lot of illegal combinations and things that should not be into the game, but for the moment they are. So I will catch you guys on the next one.